Real autism and virtual autism? What's the difference? That's what we're going to be talking about today, 12 signs of virtual autism. I'm a mom of 5 kids and my 2 youngest are autistic. So we'll be sharing examples from our home to yours. But remember, if you want to know for sure if your child's autistic or not, please see a professional. First, let's define these. So autism is a lifelong neurodevelopment condition and something that my son Simon and my son Ezra have. Simon's 5 years old, he has level 1 autism. And Ezra is 9 years old and he's level 3 autism. He also has ADHD, apraxia of speech, possible OCD, and he's nonverbal. We love them so much. They are such an important part of our family. On the other hand, virtual autism is actually not autism at all. It's just the stereotype of symptoms of autism that people kind of think are autistic. They'll see those stereotype symptoms in their child and they'll think, oh, my child's autistic. When in reality, they actually have just been spending way too much time on a screen. Sign number 1, origin. So actual autism, the autism that my 2 kids have, that I wish I could just tell you exactly what causes autism. We actually did a video right here about what we know and what's proven about the cause of autism. It's known to be genetic and have neurological roots, but the actual pinpoint cause of autism, you'll just have to watch the video we made because it's quite complicated. And virtual autism, the origin of virtual autism is that your child is on a screen for too long. While they're developing, while they're supposed to be interacting with people, you put them on screen, or the caregiver did, or someone else did. I'm not blaming you. But because they had so much screen time, when other kids around them had time to interact and socialize, they just haven't learned yet. And so they might show some stereotypical signs of autism, even though it's not autism at all. Sign 2 is the age of onset. So the age that you recognize some symptoms of autism. Now we're going to talk about real autism. It totally depends. Totally depends. Because my son, Ezra, we noticed signs of autism so early. So early. Because he has level 3 autism. And he also has more of the classic signs of autism. Which was no eye contact. No eye contact when he was younger. And not really feeling like he needed me as a really young baby. He would wake up and be in his crib and be like, I'm happy, I'm fine. Then just kind of be staring at a wall. And I'm like, you are 3 months old. You're supposed to be crying right now, right? You're supposed to be wanting me. But on the other hand, my son Simon with level 1 autism, his signs of autism kind of showed a little older because, we really only saw repetitive behavior. We did see some lack of communication, but definitely not lack of the ability to say lots of words. His vocabulary was off the charts, but yet he wouldn't use his vocabulary, the words he knew, even full sentences at 2 years old, to communicate. He wouldn't even call me mama. And so that sign was very different than the signs of autism in Ezra. And I know some people who don't recognize their autism until they're in the teens or until they're in college or 40 years old, and they go, oh, I've been autistic this whole time. Now I know, and I didn't know before. So the age of onset can be very, very different. Has a variety of ages when we're talking about real autism. Virtual autism, we're talking about toddlers who missed that time, usually a long time, a couple of years, of opportunities of socializing and learning social cues and learning communication, things like that. And they were on a screen instead. And so they just haven't learned it yet. But they can. And don't worry. They will. It'll be good. It'll be great. If you are wondering if your child's autistic, maybe you're wondering, maybe they have virtual autism, maybe they're actually autistic, then put them on a waiting list, see a professional, and while you're waiting, you can click the link in the description below because I have a free guide for you. The 10 most common signs of autism. It's absolutely free. Click that link in the description below to get that. While you're on a waiting list, see a professional. The third sign is communication. So if your child or if you are autistic, then that could look different. That could mean that maybe you'd see some echolalia. Maybe you'd see Like Simon, lots of knowledge with words, but confused about how to use them to communicate. Sometimes that communication can be nonverbal, like Ezra. Ezra communicates, but has a really, really difficult time verbalizing what he thinks and feels. And so he communicates in a different way. He communicates actually through spelling, but it's really only when he's highly motivated with spelling. But also he will point to an iPad. He has an ACC device with an app on it, and he'll go to that app, and when he presses a button, like a picture of blueberries, it'll say blueberries for him, things like that. And so that communication can look like that with someone who's autistic. But with virtual autism, the communication may be delayed, but with some help, with some support, and really just more with some practice communicating, they'll pick it up fairly fast because they're not autistic. They just haven't had that opportunity because of all their screen time during that toddler age, which is really an important time to not be on the screen and to learn and grow and use your imagination and really gain input and learn from the world around you, from gain that experiences of like watching other peers and watching adults and listening to them and then learning how to communicate. Number 4 is social interaction. So Ezra and Simon both have difficulty socializing, but it doesn't mean they don't want to be social. You have to keep that in mind. Virtual autism is more of I prefer to be on an iPad, and it's difficult to socialize with you. But when you get them off an iPad, they can socialize, and they aren't autistic. Okay, it's virtual autism, it's not real autism. And they learn quickly. Now, what's really interesting about virtual autism compared to actual, really being autistic, is that my autistic kids, they will continually, throughout their whole life, have a challenge with social interaction in some way. And it looks very different with different people. That's not just gonna automatically go away, okay? And even with support and even with, learning how to script or mask, which I don't know if I don't necessarily recommend those things. Sometimes that can be really dangerous, especially done a lot, but they can learn to kind of deal with it in their own way. Even if someone's hiding their autism, still give them a break, like they're still autistic. And I see this with my son Simon a lot. He really works hard to socialize and to try and understand what people are saying and meaning with what they say. And I see how hard he works. So someone from the sidelines who doesn't know my son might be like, oh, he doesn't even seem autistic. But I know how hard he's worked to learn. So someone with virtual autism, they might have a hard time being social when they're a kid because they've been on a screen. But as they grow up, they're not going to have a lifelong challenge with being social, with social interaction. It's different. So I want to know what you think about this. Put in the comments below, do you actually think it's perfectly fine to have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old just sit in front of the TV? Do you think that's okay? Do you think there's not really that big impact, long-term effects? Or do you think that there should be a limited time, especially with 1-year-old, 2-year-old, up to 3 years old? You can even say yes or no, okay? So yes, put them in front of the TV, it's fine. No is no. You should not just put them in front of the TV for hours. And you can explain your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you really think. And you never know who you might bless just by commenting below. Number 5 is repetitive behaviors. So both Ezra and Simon love to stim. If you don't know what stimming is, you can see a video I made right here with 12 examples of autistic stimming. I want them to be able to stim at home. I want them to feel safe enough that they can, because they're in their own room, or they're in their own dining room, in their own family room. Of course, they should be able to stim, and of course, I'm referring to stimming that doesn't hurt them or doesn't hurt anyone, doesn't hurt property, of course. Both my kids will shake their hands. They will stim in their own way. Simon loves to help regulate himself by actually playing with my hair or playing with his own hair and twirling it. And we give him other things to twirl too, so he doesn't hurt his head or hurt his hair. But that's just a way to calm himself down. So I see that a lot. I see that repetitive behavior a lot with my kids. And with a child who has, maybe some stereotypical signs of autism, classic autism, maybe they're not understanding social cues, maybe they're having a hard time communicating, they're a toddler, but they don't stim. They don't have any autistic stims. They're not using any kind of repetitive behavior. That is definitely a sign where that child may not be autistic. Maybe you just need to get them off the iPad and kind of see what happens after that and see how they interact and things like that. But of course, now that I say this, please go to a professional to know for sure. If you have a concern as a caregiver, as a teacher, especially as a parent, it doesn't hurt anything to take those concerns to a pediatrician. Number 6 is sensory processing. This is a really fascinating one. I see this with both Ezra and Simon probably every day. So Ezra is really hyposensitive physically. So he can actually get hurt and not really feel the pain like a typical person. When he was 2 years old, I remember seeing a little blood on like the bottom of his heel, and he was walking and he was not limping. I picked him up. Sure enough, he had a little sliver, and there was a little bit of blood. And I was like, you have a sliver in your foot and you're not even limping. It was like he didn't even notice. So I definitely remembered that moment and took in consideration that he is quite hyposensitive. Now, on the other hand, Ezra is hypersensitive when it comes to lights, when it comes to sounds. Simon is hypersensitive when it comes to smells. He will walk into a room, I won't smell anything, and he'll go, there's a weird smell. There's a weird smell. And I'm like, well, what does it smell like? Describe it to me. Where is it coming from? I'll try and have him communicate so I can understand what he's dealing with. But those are examples of sensory sensitivities. On the other hand, if your child has virtual autism, which is not autism at all, I'm going to say that a lot in this video, they're most likely not going to have sensory sensitivities. It's either completely absent or just really minimal. Number 7 is attention span. So both an autistic person and a young toddler who has like virtual autism can have short attention spans. That's very similar. But the difference is that an autistic child will also have intense interests and special interests that they can spend a long time doing. And I don't mean just on an iPad or on a screen. I don't mean just spending time, playing a video game. I mean, also, maybe they can talk your ear off about a certain subject or a certain singer or a band or whatever it is that they love. Ezra and Simon have their own special interests, and their attention span can last a long, long time on those interests. And that you won't usually see in a toddler with virtual autism. You'll just see that they only have a long attention span for being on a screen, and that's kind of it. So just it's something to keep in mind. I definitely see a lot with Simon. Simon has loved certain videos, and he'll watch that video over and over again, but also he'll talk about the video. He'll see that character, and he'll want that character in his room, and he'll want a plushie of that character. And he'll be able to talk to you about that character for a long time, for as long as you let him. And he'll be able to quote the videos. And so it's not just him sitting watching the video, that is his interest. And so you can see that intense interest in many aspects of his life. And again, with attention span, my son Ezra has a very, very short attention span, almost with everything, except one of his special interests is going on a hike and being in nature. And he will hike for a really long time. He loves hikes so much, and all of our kids love hiking, that we actually sold our house and moved into an RV and traveled to all the national parks together as a family with 5 kids in an RV. We came back, we live in a normal house now, like normal people, well, sort of. It's our own unique normal. We're not really normal. I actually don't like that word. But anyway, we did that. We still share regularly of our unique normal, and we'd love to share more with you. So please consider subscribing. The 8th sign is how they respond to interventions. So really, if you have a child on the spectrum, their response to interventions can be very, very different. Like, it's a spectrum, right? But usually it's a long-term dealio here. It's a long-term commitment. you've got therapies throughout your life. And especially when something new comes up, you may need therapy again, or you may need help or support again for something else. When you start like a new school, when you start a new job, when you start introduced to a new environment, things like that. The support is ongoing, and that intervention will most likely be ongoing. And I feel like it should be available to them, whether they need it or not. An autistic person should be able to, get that intervention, get that support throughout their life, because if it's needed, then it's needed. And when we're talking about virtual autism, we're talking about a very short period of their life when they're toddlers and when they miss an opportunity to socialize and engage and do pretend play, and instead someone put them on an iPad or a TV for way too long when, that critical point of their life when they should have been interacting and things like that. And so with their intervention, it's going to be short-lived. Put them in a classroom, they're going to learn, and they're going to maybe have a hard time at first. And they might need support and intervention at that time, but it's not going to be a lifelong thing because they're not autistic. So number 9 has to do with physical activity. So autistic people, they might need some intervention for motor skills, right? There's different types of motor skills that a toddler might need to learn, but they may not. They may not need any help with motor skills at all. Ezra needed a lot of physical therapy, and it was really good. I think out of all the therapies that we did when he was little, that was one of the most needed. He just had a really difficult time learning and hitting those milestones of standing up and walking and things like that. And it was a lot later in life with all that therapy. But someone like Simon, he didn't need any physical therapy at all. And so he didn't need to practice motor skills. He was actually very, very good at fine motor skills. So good that they were like, I've never seen a child do this before. So he was even advanced. But on the other hand, with virtual autism, a lot of those toddlers will need help with motor skills because they've been sitting and watching TV instead of going around and playing and being on playground and, things like that. And so they may need more support with those motor skills, more likely. But again, it's short-lived. Usually within a year, they are not showing those little stereotypical signs of autism that you might have thought was autism, but then they grew out of it because it wasn't autism. They were just in front of a screen too long. So emotional regulation is our next tip here. And for virtual autism, this maybe lack of emotional regulation could possibly just be because of their lack of real social experiences. So once they get those social experiences, they can learn fairly quickly and learn to regulate emotion that way. Just get them off the screens, people. But if they're autistic, emotional regulation is going to be something they'll deal with, and that's okay. And it'll look very different, just like Ezra and Simon. Ezra's emotional regulation is kind of, I have to come from a place as a mom and just see Ezra and be like, hey, you can't talk. That's not fair. You can be mad if you want, right? But I also want to keep him safe, right? So, but with Simon, I'm like, I will listen to you, but I also want you to know that there are boundaries, We don't hurt other people. We don't hurt damaged property, things like that. With Ezra, it's more like, let's put you in a safe spot so that you don't damage property, because you're hitting yourself against the wall and screaming, and I don't know how to help you, so I'm going to support you as much as you can. And so I obviously give more grace to Ezra because there's so much he's going through that I don't understand, and he can't tell me. And so it stinks that way. It's really, really hard. And I also have to remember as the caregiver how hard it is for him. He's not meaning to break his iPad twice. He's not meaning to destroy 5 safety beds. That actually happened. We did a video right here. We finally got him like a legit safety bed. It was the ones that you have in the hospitals for adults. It's really big and really nice. It's a very spacious bed. But he keeps him safe so he doesn't run away and elope, and I don't get a knock on my door at 2 a.m. with the cops bringing him back. We're not going to talk about that. It's fine. But But we don't want that to happen because we care about his safety. So we got him a safety bed. But he will destroy things and will decorate his room and he'll destroy that. And so his emotional regulation looks very, very different than Simon's emotional regulation, right? And of course, super, super different than someone who's not autistic, that's a toddler, that just needs to go and play on the playground and get off the screen. So very different situations here. Sign 11 is the diagnosis. So how you actually get a diagnosis and find out whether your child's autistic or you just need to play with him or her more. And they were on a screen for too long and now they have virtual autism or whatever that's called. The diagnosis for autism is going to look different depending on where you are in the world. But in the United States, you'd first see your pediatrician. They would do like kind of a checklist, very informal, and be like, oh yeah, I can recommend sending you to a professional. So you go to a professional who is board certified and who is a clinical psychologist, or maybe they're an MD, but they're also board certified, and they are trained to recognize autism. And they will be with your child maybe for 2 hours, maybe for 4 hours, just depends on what they see and how old your child is too, and how well they can communicate. And you can get that diagnosis. You can get that assessment done. My favorite is the ADOS-2 test. That one's a really good one. In a lot of places that's required, a lot of states in the United States, that's required. And then also to have an IQ test to see like where they are intellectually. Are they able to show their intellect? And with Ezra, he had a really hard time showing that. And it doesn't mean he doesn't understand. He does, he understands a lot. But I just want to put this point in here. When you see someone like my son Ezra, you may assume that he has no clue what's going on. That's not true. He just isn't able to show it to you that he understands. Virtual autism is not officially recognized. It's just when some people, parents, caregivers, see their very young toddler like not responding very well or having a hard time with communication or being social. And they kind of panic like, oh no, our child's autistic. Then they take him in, they're like, oh no, your child's not autistic, but you need to get him off of a screen. It's actually not very educational at all to have your child watch shows for a long period of time before they're 3. Your child is at a very important part of their life where their brain is gathering so much information and learning so much. And so when you can, schedule those play dates and go to the park and help them interact with people and have those, fun play, imaginary play, creative play, it will really help them develop instead of just using the screen as a babysitter, even though it is super convenient, believe me, I know. But let's do a little less of that and help these kids out. The last one is basically, in a nutshell, autism is a long-term condition. You don't just not have autism, right? If you're autistic, you're autistic. And you might change with levels. There's 3 levels, at least recognized in the United States. And this is not the level of severity of autism. It's the level of support you need. That's very different. We did a video on it right here. So my child, Simon, this is super interesting. When he was diagnosed at 2 years old, he actually was diagnosed with level 1 with repetitive behaviors, and then level 2 in the language category. And now he's level 1 in the language category because he's learned so well and he's just caught on really, really quick. He actually doesn't qualify for an IEP anymore. He's starting kindergarten, which I don't know how I feel about that, but we're not going to talk about that right now. I'm glad he's doing well. I'm glad he's thriving. But it's changed. So the levels are expected to change. They're meant to change. Hopefully with support, the levels of support that they need, right, will lessen. And so they won't need as much support. The goal is for your child or for you, the autistic person, to gain the most autonomy possible, to have the most independence possible for you, and have the most independence in your life and say in your life. On the other hand, with virtual autism, symptoms can often be mitigated with lifestyle changes. And it's not this long-term effect. It's not this, my child is affected by virtual autism for the rest of their life. That is not true. If you get them the support that they need, they can get out of it. Just change those lifestyle, like how they live, how they spend their time. And that can really help. Get your child out there, get them a friend, get them going, put them in a sport. If your child doesn't have autism, then that virtual autism, those symptoms aren't going to last their whole life. Here is 12 signs of autism with a child under 2 years old. And here's our autism playlist. And remember, if you have an autistic child, then you're in good company.